House of Commons.
Well done, man. Well done. Other duties as assigned. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank my colleagues from the Senate and the House, supporters of the No Political Enemies Act, which we will be shortly introducing. We are going to have a few other members, including Senator Schumer, joining us over the course of this event. But since there are so many, we'll get right to it. The shooting of Charlie Kirk was a national tragedy. It should have been a line in the sand, an opportunity for President Trump to bring this country together, to do whatever is necessary to stamp out political violence that's targeted both Republicans and Democrats, political violence that emanates from both right-wing and left-wing radicalization. But Trump and his lieutenants are choosing a different path. They are choosing to exploit this tragedy, to weaponize the federal government, to destroy Donald Trump's political opposition. They aren't even hiding what they are trying to do. President Trump himself has publicly threatened to arrest members of the Soros family simply for funding groups that oppose his agenda. Laura Loomer, maybe the most influential outside advisor to the White House, called on Trump to be a dictator and lock up and silence his political enemies. And last night, they showed us exactly how serious they are. Trump's FCC forced a major network to pull a loud Trump critic, Jimmy Kimmel, off the air, essentially saying that any media actor that doesn't say what Trump wants them to say about Charlie Kirk or Trump's policies is going to be silenced. That's censorship. That's state speech control. That's not America. Trump is making it 100% clear that he is going to ramp up his efforts to use the power of the federal government to harass and punish his critics, not because they're supporters of political violence, they are not, but because they have the audacity to openly oppose his policies. This is a standard format for every budding despot. That's why we are going to be introducing, in both the Senate and the House, the No Political Enemies Act. This is legislation that makes sure that the law is on the side of free speech and the right to dissent. Now, I wish this legislation weren't necessary, but it is now. Donald Trump right now is instructing his Department of Justice to go on the hunt for his political enemies. Attorney General Bondi has made it clear she is going to arrest people just for speech that she doesn't or the president doesn't agree with. That is bone-chilling. So we need to build new protections in court when a political opponent of the president is targeted by Trump's DOJ or his regulatory regime, simply for political speech. And so the No Political Enemies Act creates a specific defense for those that are being targeted for political reasons. It builds real consequences for government officials when they use the power of the government to target speech that is protected by the First Amendment. And it gives an ability to recover attorney's fees when someone is the subject of government harassment. This is a decision moment for the country. Conservatives who say that they support democracy and free speech need to speak up right now. Our Republican colleagues need to put the health of our democracy before loyalty to their leader. And this legislation, supported by a wide cross-section of free speech advocates and groups all across the country, is a tool for us to rally around. Again, I thank my colleagues for being here to step up and rise to this moment and support this vital legislation. And with that, I'm going to introduce Senator Schumer.
Thank you. And let me thank Senator Murphy for his great leadership and all my colleagues for being here today. First, let's be very clear. Political violence has no place in America. But let's also be clear. The Trump administration campaign of threats against civil society and free speech, this is an assault on everything this country has stood for since the Constitution's been signed. One of the great hallmarks of our country is free speech, whether you agree or disagree. And this administration is trying to snuff it out. They don't want people to even speak when they don't like what they say. That is the road to autocracy. The U.S. was built on the right to free speech. And some of us might not even agree with the expansive definitions that some of the courts have done on things like Citizens United. But it's a hallmark of America. It's a hallmark of America. And the right to organize, to advocate, to petition your government, those words, no matter what the views are. That's the beating heart of our democracy. And there's an assault on democracy coming out of the White House and their allies. And we see more evidence of it every day. Those who break the law, of course, resort to any source of violence, got to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But using the tragic death of Charlie Kirk as an excuse to supercharge a political witch hunt against critics is abhorrent, obnoxious, and as un-American as it gets. What happened to Charlie Kirk is, of course, abhorrent, and even more chilling is that we know all too well it wasn't an isolated incident. But it's repulsive that the Trump administration is perversely using this awful death as a predicate to supercharge their long-standing campaign against political opponents. How low can they go? Every day you wonder, and they go even lower. And this is, unfortunately, a very, very glaring example of just that. It's not a new campaign. They've been engaged in an ever-escalating campaign to use the mighty power of the federal government to attack civil society. Whether it's Jimmy Kimmel, civil society organizations, or the Trump administration's perceived political enemies, its crusade is unending. And this is one of the saddest parts of all, because of congressional Republicans' obeisance to Trump, it's unchecked, because they are scared to stand up to Trump. Where are they? Where are our Republican colleagues in denouncing this stuff? We don't hear from them. But Democrats will not stand by. We will fight these abuses in the courts, in the court of public opinion, in Congress. So that's why I'm proud to stand with all of my colleagues here today to announce the No Political Enemies Act, legislation to stop the government from being used as a political weapon. The principle is simple. No president, Democrat, Republican, has the right to turn the federal government into an instrument of political revenge. That is what they're doing. That's what autocrats do. It's the kind of thing that Xi would do, that Putin would do. And Trump is doing it. It's disgraceful. So, it's not hard to understand. NOPE Act says the government must not engage in political motivated targeting and retaliation. The threats of political investigations and retaliation from the administration against their perceived political enemies strike at the heart, the beating heart of what this country is all about and has been since the days the farmers on Bunker Hill put down their plows and took up muskets for things like freedom of speech. So, Democrats won't stand for it. We'll fight back. We will defend the freedoms that make America a democracy, not an autocracy. And I thank my colleagues for joining us.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Senator Van Hollen?
I want to start by thanking Senator Murphy, my fellow senators and fellow House members for advancing this initiative to protect First Amendment rights in the United States of America. We shouldn't have to be here today. The First Amendment is crystal clear. The government may not use its power to squash political dissent. That is textbook First Amendment. But that is what President Trump has been doing since the beginning of his administration, and now they've announced their intention to dramatically step up that effort. In the aftermath of the terrible murder of Charlie Kirk, President Trump could have united the country. He could have united the country behind the simple principle that political violence is unacceptable regardless of the source. Instead, he and his lackeys in the Trump administration at the DOJ, at the FBI, at the FCC, and elsewhere have decided to weaponize that horrible murder for his own political purposes, to use government power to crack down on dissent and to go after his critics. This is not new for this administration. Donald Trump claimed to be a champion of the First Amendment at the same time he was locking up students for exercising it, and the Trump administration has been going after universities and law firms and media outlets for political purposes, targeting them for political reasons. But this new attack on free speech is now accelerating. Trump and his Attorney General have vowed to go after groups and organizations whose views they disagree with. Just the other day, FCC Chair Brendan Carr threatened Disney, ABC, and Jimmy Kimmel. Here's what he said. I'm going to read one line from what he said. He said, quote, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead." That is a textbook example of violation of the First Amendment, using government power, abusing government power. The FCC chair essentially threatening to use his power over licenses and mergers to pressure companies to fire Kimmel. Shamefully, ABC fell in line. They capitulated. They didn't have to, but they did. This legislation that Senator Murphy and the rest of us are introducing, and today's the framework, but the bill will follow, will strengthen the ability of individuals and organizations to protect themselves against this abuse of government power and deter government officials from engaging in that effort to go after it. That's why we need to pass this legislation. We have to stand with those who stand up against illegal bullying by Donald Trump and his administration, because bullies, they try to pick people and organizations off one by one until there's no one left to stand up for anybody else. And those who capitulate and those who appease that effort simply put the rest of us and our rights at risk. That's how dictators, that's how kings, that's how authoritarians rule. The First Amendment was established out of the bitter experience of individuals being locked up by King George I, King George II, and King George III, simply for criticizing those kings. We fought a revolution in this country over that, and we're not going back. As I said at the beginning, we shouldn't have to be here, but we will not be silenced, and we must protect the First Amendment and political dissent. That's what this bill, that's what this initiative will do. And I thank my colleagues.
Representative Crow.
Thank you to Senators Murphy and Van Hollen in particular for conceiving of this legislation, and to all my colleagues standing here. We stand here united against political violence, condemning it in all of its forms and all of its motivations. And we stand here united in the breach, in defense of the American right to speak, to protest, to dissent. I went to war 3 times for this country. I swore many oaths to protect the Constitution, to protect this nation when I did so. And when I did that, I did it knowing that I would be called upon potentially to give my life in defense for people to say things that maybe I disagreed with. Because that is who we are. That is what generation and generation of American before us has done, has sacrificed and sometimes given their lives. So we can disagree, we can debate, we can find that path to a more perfect union. And right now, we are facing an unprecedented assault against that very value. What is more American than the ability to stand up and question authority? The ability to stand up and debate and to speak. The reason why that's so fundamental is that none of us have a monopoly on getting it right all the time. I don't. Democrats don't. Republicans don't. Nobody gets it right all of the time. The beauty in our system is that we can have that push and pull. People can speak up and be protected in doing that. But what we see out of Donald Trump and his lieutenants, like Stephen Miller and Laura Loomer, is an unprecedented assault on that very right. Fear and intimidation. An effort by them to say who can speak up and who cannot. An effort by them to say, and only them, who's a terrorist and who's not. Who has the right to speak and who doesn't. Power is always cyclical in America. And the reason why we protect it for everybody is that the minority and those not in power, now it's us, but sometime in the future it'll be somebody else, have that right to question us, to push back. And if we lose it, we all lose it. So every American, Democrat, Republican, and Independent must stand up in this moment to say no. We will fiercely defend and carry forward the torch of Americans who have fought and defended it in the past, and we will not allow us to lose it on our watch. This legislation is simple. It says that if you are a civil servant, if you are doing the work of this nation, to protect our food, to make sure plans land safely, to defend our country in uniform, that you also have the right to speak up and question authority. Because we will all be better off if we can say that. So we ask, we implore conservatives, independents, progressives, everybody to join this effort, because now is the time.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Well, good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. Thank you, Senator Murphy, and all of my colleagues here. So I would like to read you a quote about the importance of free speech, the most fundamental of our values and rights as Americans. The quote is, "We don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say, but when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. We may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square. Agree or disagree." Now, this quote isn't about being a Republican or a Democrat, though a Republican said these words. Vice President J.D. Vance said these words less than a year ago. But any of us could have made them, could have said the same thing, because they express that most American of values, that in this country, we can say whatever we think, whatever we believe, and we don't have to worry about the high and mighty leader that we may offend. Our rights as Americans is to annoy and even offend whomever we like. Our speech, our words, our principles are protected. So as long as you're not making an actual threat, as long as you're not inciting violence or yelling fire in a crowded building, we can say whatever the hell we want about presidents and kings and about the rich and powerful. But we are losing that, and everyone can feel it. Just this morning, I was on the radio with a talk radio station in the upper Midwest, up in Fargo-Moorhead. This isn't some left-wing program. It's in Fargo-Moorhead. And as I was waiting to get on, I had a chat with the producer, and the producer said, "Senator, I didn't think that this could happen, but we are afraid that they're going to come after us, that we're going to get taken off the air." And that is not paranoia. when you see that the FCC, just as one example, how they are bringing the full force of the federal government down to silence the president's critics, that is not paranoia. Who wouldn't be afraid? We have been in a fever dream these last months, an escalating rampage of one side of our deep political divide trying mightily to exert maximum pressure on the other side, even at the cost of free speech. This is the balance of power that defines our Constitution. This is happening even at the cost of our more perfect union. And what we are doing today is we are saying, stop it, enough. We are at this moment in this great democracy, this great imperfect democracy, where we actually need to spell out clearly that there will be costs when the federal government tries to go after people and organizations in our civil society and take away their rights to participate and to speak out. We are saying enough. That must be what we protect in this government, in this country. Today, my Democratic colleagues and I are saying we respect your right to say what you believe, and we're going to protect your right to do and say what you believe. That is what this legislation is all about, because that is what free speech means in this country.
Thank you. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, and all of my colleagues for leaning in at this additional critical moment. This is the United States of America, where since the beginning we have protected free speech. That's why we're here today, because we have a president and an administration that has been weaponizing the government against their critics, plain and simple. An attorney general who is vowing to prosecute Americans for what she alone deems hate speech, a president who threatens a reporter with prosecution for asking a question about that, and Donald Trump personally suing the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal for publishing stories that he doesn't like. And just last night, ABC announcing they're pulling down Jimmy Kimmel's show following the pressure from the chairman of the FCC. Now, what happened to Jimmy Kimmel last night, and Stephen Colbert for that matter, isn't just about one comedian or one television personality or any one network. It's about whether we as Americans still have the freedom to laugh at those in power, to question authority, and to tell the truth without fear of retribution. Now, history shows us that when leaders start silencing entertainers and journalists and critics, it's not because they're strong, it's because they're weak. So we have to ask, what is this administration afraid of? They're afraid of accountability, plain and simple. They're afraid of being questioned and their record being held up to the light. Because when the record is exposed on health care, on the economy, on corruption, they know the American people won't stand for it. And so make no mistake, they are looking for excuses to crack down on dissent. I'm proud to represent California, and California knows these efforts far too well. We've seen Trump respond to overwhelmingly peaceful protests in Southern California to federalize and send in National Guard troops and then deploy the Marines into an American city. We see it today as Donald Trump is trying to extort UCLA and other universities for not falling in line with his agenda. And I experienced it personally when I had the audacity to ask a question at a press conference with the Secretary of Homeland Security and was thrown to the ground and handcuffed. So today, it's no surprise that the Trump administration is using the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk last week to justify its latest crackdown. And we have all denounced that assassination. We have all denounced political violence in all its forms anywhere in our country. Now, you could disagree with just about everything he stood for, or agreed with him for that matter, but in the spirit of Charlie Kirk, he came to debate. And he was proud to say so. He came to debate and to exercise his right to free speech, no matter how controversial. So we're here to help protect that right for all Americans through legislation to prevent the President of the United States from punishing people for constitutionally protected speech. Because the day that we stop fighting for our rights is the day that we lose them. And we're not going to go quietly. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thanks, Alex. Senator Booker.
My mom talks a lot about this memory she had as a little girl in Detroit, Michigan, where she would be woken up in the middle of the night to help a black family or a black person take shelter in their basement apartment while they got them food and supplies to get them over to Canada. And when I was young and growing up and first started hearing these stories, I said, why did you need to help black families escape into Canada? And my mom and my grandparents would tell me that it was because in their southern communities, they said something to someone that offended some authority, some social mores, and they faced vicious reprisals. So much so they'd have to give up their jobs and their families and flee the government and those that they were enabling who would terrorize and target those people. And it was so bad that they felt the only safety for these people was to get them out of America. My grandparents witnessed the Red Scare and McCarthyism. They witnessed the targeting of artists like comedians that they loved, from Lenny Bruce, who was censored, to a whole generation of black comedians that were targeted for their jokes and what they said. My mom was an activist in the civil rights movement, and standing up and speaking truth could get you killed. From those who went out to register people to vote, like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, to people like Fred Shuttlesworth that had their houses bombed and their families attacked for what they said, for speaking truth to power. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of the fact that my grandparents, at a terrible time in our country's history, did actions of defiance, defense, and actions of democracy. I just want to tell everybody right now, we are in our dark and dangerous time in America. This is a dark and dangerous time. And it's a time that we do something about it, and it starts with speaking up. I would like to believe that my grandparents in heaven right now look at this legislation and are proud of it. But this legislation is not enough. All of us right now have to begin to believe, what are we doing in defense of one of the most fundamental constitutional principles? Some of us have sworn an oath to defend our Constitution. It is under assault right now. I am telling you, if we at the people, not just folks who agree on some partisan spectrum, but all Americans stand up in defense of the right to speak your truth as you see it, if we do that, if we respond to these assaults on the First Amendment by locking arms, we won't just defend democracy. We will do what my grandparents and parents' generations did, said, and sang. We shall overcome this dark time.
Thank you, Corey. Representative Sir.
Thank you, Senator Booker, for those powerful words in that story, and thank you, Senator Murphy, for bringing us together today. Let's just say it plain and simple. President Trump is abusing the vast powers of the federal government to shut down people who dare disagree with him. From universities to law firms to nonprofits to journalists, Trump is abusing his power and violating the First Amendment daily to punish anyone who does not line up behind his agenda. That would be wrong no matter which party did it, no matter who the president was. So I'm thankful to my colleagues who are putting together this legislation to protect churches and nonprofits, newspapers, magazines, colleges, workers, students from any president who tries to target his political opponents, shred our Constitution, and disgrace our values in the process. We are in the biggest free speech crisis this country has faced since the McCarthy era. The murder of Charlie Kirk was a horrific crime, and it's clear that Trump wants to hijack that horrific crime to silence anyone who disagrees with the president about any issue. While Mr. Kirk's tragic murder is new, Trump's desire to shut down all opposition is not. From the beginning of his administration, Trump has tried to go after anyone who dares question him. And as we saw last night, far too many billionaires and corporate-owned media companies are bending the knee. Disney and ABC, Paramount and CBS, the Washington Post editorial board, Facebook. Let's be clear. The ultra-wealthy men who run these companies are making a choice. David Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Bob Iger. These men are enriching themselves, auctioning off the United States' First Amendment to a wannabe tyrant. We have to ask ourselves that if Watergate happened today, would our biggest news outlets be allowed to run the story? Or would a billionaire owner decide that crossing the administration just isn't worth it for his bottom line? If you're watching at home, please know this is not just about the rights of a TV host or a big university. Trump and his billionaire buddies want to silence dissent so that they can run the country for their own benefit. First, it might have been they came after students and professors. Next, it's media companies and journalists. After that, it's churches and nonprofits. After that, it's you. It's all of us. Remember that Donald Trump did not turn against Jimmy Kimmel because of anything he said this week. He turned against Jimmy Kimmel when 8 years ago, Mr. Kimmel spoke up about stopping Trump and Trump trying to take away the Affordable Care Act from millions of Americans. That's what's at stake in this moment. The ability of the American people to speak out against the billionaire takeover of our government and be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Representative Crow, for bringing us all together today to show the American people that we stand shoulder to shoulder and in a large group and in a united way to protect our First Amendment rights. The Constitution is not a buffet. You don't get to pick and choose what you like and ignore the rest. The Constitution is absolute. It is binding, and it is our sworn duty to protect and defend it, all of it. We didn't use the tragic murders of Melissa and Mark Hortman to rip apart the Second Amendment in June. And we cannot and we should not use the murder of Charlie Kirk to rip apart the First Amendment in September. We must restrain ourselves collectively, all of us, from twisting tragedy into an excuse to punish our political enemies, to muzzle the press, to silence dissent, or to pressure schools and businesses and the military into purging voices that we might not like. That's not justice, and that's certainly not freedom. To be honest, that's tyranny. So I want to take a moment to speak to my colleagues in Congress. Yesterday was National Constitution Day, and Rep. Goodlander and I spent some time passing out hundreds of constitutions, copies of the Constitution, to our colleagues, reminding our colleagues that it is National Constitution Day and that we swore an oath, not to a party and not to a president, but to that Constitution, to that document, and to the people that we serve, even those who oppose us and even those who dislike us. And if we collectively keep smashing the foundations of this, our democracy, for short-term political gain, there won't be anything left for all of us to stand on. I know that a lot of people are out there actively cheering on this administration's attack on the liberal organizations, the strategy to silence and punish them. And that's your prerogative. That's your right. That's your freedom. Although I do think, as those before me have mentioned, that targeting or curtailing free speech is and always will be the wrong choice over the long run. And you will be on the wrong side of history for supporting this campaign. So to my colleagues, I implore you to stop now with the silencing, to stop now with the dividing, to please stop with the destruction, because the cost is far too high for all of us. Benjamin Franklin, a famous American, a famous Pennsylvanian, and a famous Philadelphian, wrote that freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away from us, the constitution of a free society is dissolved, and tyranny is erected in its ruins. So for 250 years, we've held strong in the face of this tyranny, and we must, for the next 250 years, hold strong too, because we all know this American experience is worth the effort. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Chris. Representative Frost.
Good afternoon. My name is Maxwell Alejandro Frost. I proudly represent my hometown of Central Florida here in the United States Congress. I want to thank Senator Chris Murphy and Congressman Jason Crow for their leadership on this important legislation to fight back against the Trump administration's attacks on the most fundamental freedom that we have as Americans, the freedom to speak, to dissent, and to criticize our government without fear. We should all be very fearful and scared of what we're seeing happening in this country right now. This administration is scaring people into silence, ridiculing reporters and blocking them from the White House, suing and extorting settlements from the media, threatening ABC over Kimmel, taking funding from nonprofits, intimidating businesses who cave to their demands. We need to be asking what will be left of this nation when the Trump administration is finished. And this isn't even about left versus right. It's not even about silencing certain political leaning. We've seen even right-wing news mainstream media outlets that are too scared to even question him at the most basic parts. This is about silencing criticism of Donald Trump, who believes that he's a king. Donald Trump doesn't want a democracy. He wants a throne, and his cronies are clearing the way. The president and his lapdogs here in the United States Congress, the vice president, the FCC chair, the attorney general, secretary of state, and congressional Republicans are implementing a dangerous agenda to punish their opposition. Fascism is not on the way, it is here. The First Amendment is how generations of Americans, from civil rights activists to labor organizers, American worker, LGBTQ+ activists, have fought for progress, and it is our power. And I say this as someone who has protested on the streets of my district, has been tear gas, mace, arrested, and jailed in the jail I now represent in Congress. So this is very personal to me. We cannot let the fear of speaking out become normal. We cannot allow truth-telling become a crime, and we cannot let them silence us. The NOPE Act is about strengthening the laws that protect the people from an administration that fears truth and fears democracy. An administration that wants to divide our nation, divide the working class, to distract from the fact that they're doing everything they can to enrich billionaires and to enrich mega corporations. That's exactly what happened with Jimmy Kimmel last night. The Oversight Committee will have more to say about this, what happened last night. But look no further than the fact that Sinclair is in the middle of an acquisition that the FCC has to approve. All of this ties back to money and people enriching themselves and bending the knee to Donald Trump to make it happen. This bill will give us another tool to fight back. And while congressional Republicans lie down and do nothing and enable this, Democrats will be advancing this bill, launching investigations, sending subpoenas to expose the ever-mounting corruption. When we don't have all the power we want, we use all the power we got, and that's what this bill is about. When we use every tool we have, especially our freedom of speech, to stand up to the onslaught against the American people, we can win. And I encourage my Republican colleagues to join us on this. Thank you.
Thanks. Maxwell, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Senator Murphy, it's not only just President Trump who's doing this. There are a lot of your Republican colleagues in the House tried to censure Ilhan Omar last night. They're calling people's employers. How can you not only do protections for people who are targeted by the president, but members of Congress and anybody who's trying to go after and get people fired for their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an epidemic where there will be speech control, both in the public sphere but in the private sphere as well. These corporations are so greedy that they are willing to do anything and everything in order to make as much money as possible, including being lieutenants in Donald Trump's effort to try to control political speech. So, listen, we need to be talking not just to President Trump and the broad public, but to the corporate community as well, and put the question to them. You're going to rue this moment. You're going to regret this moment on your deathbed when America is no longer a democracy anymore, and you were willing participants in the effort to destroy political speech, either by shutting down voices like Jimmy Kimmel that had every right to be able to speak in dissent to the president, or patrolling the speech of your employees who have just as much of a right to express their political opinions as well. So this is a big job because we have to be speaking to our Republican colleagues to get them to do the right thing. We've got to be talking to the public, but we have to be talking to the corporate community as well.
Senator Murphy, thank you. I know where you stand, but is your leadership willing to shut down the government because, as you know, you all fund the FCC over this? I mean, they need your votes to keep the lights on.
Well, listen, Republicans won't even talk to Democrats right now about how to keep the government open and operating. So right now, it's clear that the Republicans are gunning for a shutdown because if they wanted to keep the government open and operating, they would be having conversations with Democrats. I'll just speak for myself. I do not think Democrats have an obligation to fund the destruction of our democracy. And so, of course, for me, I am going to require that there be at least some modicum of protections for democracy in any budget that we pass. Obviously, why would we write a budget that the president isn't even committed to implementing? Why would we fund this level of lawlessness at a moment that the country is under threat? I guess that wasn't the right answer. So, go ahead, we'll take a couple more.
Okay, so if Democrats were to get the gavel before Carr's term is over, what does that mean? Schumer has called for him to resign. So do you guys have any power to see a path forward for, handling the Carr situation?
Well, it's been pretty remarkable how honest Brendan Carr has been. He's making the rounds of right-wing media, essentially celebrating the fact that he is using in an illegal manner the power of his position to shut down political speech. He really doesn't talk too much about hate speech or violent speech. He just is clear that he's trying to silence progressive voices. I think that creates a real political problem for the president, but also a legal problem for the FCC. So the more that Brendan Carr talks, the less likely it is that their actions are going to be able to hold up in court.
Senator, one argument that we've heard from some conservatives today regarding Jimmy Kimmel is that the Biden administration did the exact same thing when they pressured companies like Meta and Google last year to censor, in the last few years, censor information related to COVID. So what would you say, Republicans, your colleagues, who are saying this?
Yeah, that's simply not true, right? To try to equate making sure we get out good information and appropriate information versus the propaganda and the misinformation and the lies that are being put out by this administration are simply not the same thing, right? We're looking for freedom of speech. We're looking to protect it for everybody. And what we're seeing is an unprecedented effort to crack down on all speech. As our colleagues said, almost regardless of the source, right? Right now, it's Democrats and it's progressive organizations, but it also has been conservative organizations. It's anybody who dares question the authority of this president, whether there's an R or a D or a U behind your name. Right into the first question, this is not just a story about a runaway president who's looking to abuse and consolidate power, right? Because that actually was envisioned in the Constitution. And that's why the Constitution was built the way that it was, to distribute that power. Because there are a lot of people who do have power. The majority of this Congress has the power to stop it right now. Big businesses, universities, law firms, media conglomerates, they face a choice. They can stop it and stand in the breach right now. But if they don't right now, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year later, everybody starts losing that power over time. So now is the moment to use it.
Take one more.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm going to try and sneak in too, and use a White House reporter trick. So I'm happy not to do that. Two questions. As a reporter, two questions. One, in terms of what you all can do, you said that some said the FCC commissioner should resign, but should he be impeached? That is potential motion on the floor that could be accepted for House members, especially. Number two, what is Democrats' responsibility for the rhetoric right now? We heard your fellow member, I'm sorry, he left, talk about fascism, saying we're having fascism now. We know the shooter, suspected shooter in Utah, had the word fascist on supposedly one of the rounds of artillery. Republicans say that Democrats are part of the problem right now because of moving towards that fascism fascist. So those are two questions.
Well, listen, we have to tell the truth. And the truth is hard to hear right now. The truth is that Donald Trump is trying to destroy our democracy. He is trying to silence free speech. He is acting in a way that is scarily similar to many would-be despots all across this world, all across history, who have tried to transition a country from democracy to autocracy. And so we have no obligation to sugarcoat the gravity of this moment. The only way we save this nation is if the people of this country rise up in peaceful protest, if they mobilize all across America. These companies won't really think twice about their money grab until they know that the American people are firmly on the side of protecting free speech. And so the only way that you build that kind of mobilization is to tell the truth. So this is another tried and true tactic of despots, is that they label any criticism of them as hate speech or terrorism or incitement to violence. This is how democracies disappear, is that you allow the regime to create terminology that essentially invalidates the ability to speak truth to power, and we're not gonna let them silence us. I don't know if you want to take the, yeah, great. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.